The smallest boy hadn't made a sound in 11 days. Not when they buried Mama in the hard summer dirt. Not when the sheriff nailed their cabin door shut. Not when strangers spat at them on the road and called them beggar trash. 6-year-old Hank just walked, one hand gripping his big sister's dress, his eyes as empty as the sky above the Montana plains. 12-year-old Carrie Holloway pulled her 4 siblings closer as they stumbled up the dirt path toward the last ranch before nowhere. "Please," she whispered to a God who'd stopped listening weeks ago. "Just one person. Just one." The rancher's shotgun was already aimed at her chest. If you're watching from your corner of the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far these 5 children's journey travels. And if this story moves you, hit subscribe and stay until the end. Now let me take you back to that summer day when everything changed. "Get off my land!" Jacob Mercer's finger rested on the trigger. Steady. Ready. The same way it had rested 1,000 times before when wolves came for his cattle or drifters came looking for trouble. But these weren't wolves. These weren't drifters. These were children. 5 of them, standing in the blazing afternoon sun at the edge of his property. Filthy, starving. The oldest one, a girl maybe 12, had positioned herself in front of the others like a shield, like she thought her skinny body could stop a bullet. "Please, mister," her voice cracked. "We ain't here to steal nothin'. We just need water. That's all. Just water, and we'll go." Jacob didn't lower the shotgun. "There's a creek 2 miles east. Help yourselves." "We tried that creek." The girl's chin lifted, defiant despite the fear in her eyes. "It's dry. Been dry for weeks, the man at the last farm said. Before he set his dogs on us." Behind her, one of the younger ones whimpered. A boy, maybe 8, with hollow cheeks and skin burned red from the sun. He was holding the hand of an even smaller boy, who stared at nothing, face blank as paper. "That ain't my problem." Jacob's voice came out flat, dead, the way it had sounded for 6 years now. "I said get off my land." "We will. I swear we will." The girl took a step forward, and Jacob's grip tightened on the shotgun. She stopped. Smart girl. "Just let us fill our canteens. 5 minutes. Then you'll never see us again." "You've got 3 seconds to turn around." "Carrie," a boy's voice, older than the others, hard with anger. "Forget it. I told you this was stupid. Nobody's going to help us. Let's go." Jacob's eyes shifted to the speaker. A boy of 10, maybe 11, with dark hair and a jaw set like stone. This one wasn't scared. This one was furious. The kind of fury that came from being let down too many times. "Will, please." The girl, Carrie, didn't turn around. She kept her eyes locked on Jacob. "Mister, we've been walking for 6 days. My little sister's only 4. My brother Hank, he's 6, and he ain't been right since Mama died. They can't make it to the next town. They can't." 1. "We ain't asking for charity. I can work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. Will's strong. He can chop wood, haul water, anything you need." 2. "Please." The word broke in her throat. "Our Mama died 11 days ago. We got nowhere to go. The orphanage in Helena, they'll split us up. I promised her. I promised Mama we'd stay together. Please, mister, I'm begging you." Jacob's finger tightened on the trigger. And then the littlest one stepped out from behind her sister. 4 years old, blonde curls matted with dirt. A dress that might have been blue once, but was now gray with dust and sweat. She looked up at Jacob with eyes that had no business being so big, so trusting, so damn familiar. "Are you going to shoot us, mister?" The question hit Jacob like a mule kick to the chest. Emma used to ask questions like that. Direct, innocent, completely unaware of how the words could gut a man. Emma, who'd been 4 years old when the fever took her. Emma, who'd had blonde curls and blue eyes and a way of looking at him that made him feel like he could do anything. Emma, who'd been dead for 6 years and still showed up in his nightmares every single night. Jacob lowered the shotgun. 5 minutes, he heard himself say. Then you're gone. The relief that flooded the girl's face was almost painful to watch. "Thank you. Thank you, mister. Come on, everyone, hurry!" They moved past him like a small herd of spooked cattle, eyes down, bodies tense, clearly expecting him to change his mind at any second. The angry boy, Will, shouldered past with his chin high and his fists clenched, making a point of not thanking Jacob for anything. The little girl stopped right in front of him. "I'm Sarah," she announced. "What's your name?" "Sarah, come on." Carrie grabbed her sister's hand, shooting Jacob an apologetic look. "Leave the man alone." But Sarah didn't move. She was staring at Jacob's face with that unnerving intensity only small children could manage. "You look sad," she said. "Are you sad?" "Sarah." "It's okay to be sad." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I'm sad too. But Carrie says it gets better. Does it get better, mister?" Jacob couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely. Carrie scooped Sarah up and hurried toward the water pump near the barn, the other children following. Jacob stood frozen in the yard, shotgun hanging loose at his side, the little girl's question echoing in his skull. Does it get better? No, it doesn't. It never gets better. You just learn to live with the weight until it crushes you. He should have kept walking, should have gone back to the barn and let them drink their fill and disappeared down the road toward whatever miserable fate awaited them. Instead, he found himself moving toward the pump. Carrie was filling canteens with shaking hands, while the others drank directly from the spout, water running down their chins, their necks, soaking into their ragged clothes. The middle boy, the one who'd been holding the silent child's hand, had his face practically buried in the stream. "Tommy, slow down." Carrie's voice was gentle but firm. "You'll make yourself sick." "I don't care." Tommy came up gasping. "That's the best water I ever tasted in my whole life." "You're 8. You ain't had that much life yet." "I've had enough life to know good water," Tommy grinned, and despite everything, despite the hollow cheeks and the sunburned skin, there was still mischief in that smile. "Hey, mister, you got any food? Carrie says we shouldn't ask, but I figure if you were going to kill us, you would have done it already, so maybe you're not so bad." "Tommy." Carrie's face flushed red. "I'm so sorry, mister. He doesn't know when to stop talking." "That's what Mama always said." Tommy's grin faded. "She used to say I could talk the ears off a mule." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Jacob looked at them. Really looked. At Carrie, who couldn't be more than 12, but carried herself like a woman twice her age. At Will, standing apart from the others, arms crossed, radiating hostility and hurt in equal measure. At Tommy, trying so hard to be cheerful, when everything inside him was clearly breaking. At Hank, the silent one, who stood motionless while water dripped down his face, not bothering to wipe it away, not reacting at all. And at Sarah, little Sarah, who'd found a butterfly and was trying to catch it with her cupped hands, already forgetting the man with a shotgun who'd been ready to send them away. "When did you eat last?" Jacob asked. Carrie hesitated. "We had some berries this morning." "Berries. And Tommy caught a squirrel 2 days ago. We cooked it over a fire. A squirrel. For 5 of you. We've had less. Will's voice was sharp. We don't need your pity. Will, Carrie turned on her brother. Stop it. Stop what? Telling the truth? We've been begging for scraps for 11 days, Carrie. Every single person's either turned us away or tried to take advantage. Remember that man in Billings? The one who said he'd feed us if you... Will, I'm just saying, we can't trust anyone. Especially not some hermit who lives alone in the middle of nowhere and points guns at children. He's right. Everyone turned. Jacob hadn't meant to speak, but the words came out anyway. Your brother's right. You can't trust anyone. That's the first smart thing I've heard all day. Will blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. But here's the thing, boy. Jacob took a step closer. Right now, you don't have a lot of options. You can keep walking in this heat with no food and not enough water, and maybe you make it to the next town, or maybe you don't. Or you can accept help from a stranger who hasn't given you any reason to trust him, except that he hasn't shot you yet. Will's jaw tightened. What kind of help? There's food in the house. Real food. Bread, bacon, eggs. I was about to make supper anyway. Jacob couldn't believe what he was saying. Couldn't believe he was offering this. You're welcome to join me. Why? Will demanded. What do you want from us? Will, for God's sake, Carrie started. No, Carrie. Nobody does nothing for free. That's what Pa always said. So what do you want, mister? You want us to work? You want me to shovel your horse shit? I want you to shut up and let your sister make a decision. Jacob's voice cut like a blade. She's the one who's been keeping you alive. She's the one who walked up to a man with a shotgun and begged for water. So maybe, just maybe, you could show her a little respect and let her choose. Will's face went red. His fists clenched. For a second, Jacob thought the boy might actually take a swing at him. Then Carrie stepped between them. Will, enough! Her voice was quiet, but carried iron underneath. Go sit by the pump. Cool off. Carrie, go! The siblings stared at each other. Some silent battle of wills played out in the space between them. Finally, Will turned and stalked away, kicking up dust with every step. Carrie watched him go, then turned back to Jacob. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Jacob suspected she hadn't let herself cry in a long time. I'm sorry about him, she said. He's not usually like this. Before Mama got sick, he was different. He used to laugh, used to play. Now he's angry. He's scared. We all are. Carrie took a breath. Mister, I don't know why you're offering to help us. I don't know if this is real or if you're just going to change your mind in 5 minutes. But my brother Tommy's so hungry, his hands shake. Sarah asks every day when we're going to eat a real meal. And Hank, she glanced at the silent boy, still standing by the pump, water dripping from his face like tears. Hank needs something I can't give him. He needs to feel safe. He needs to know someone's coming to save us. Her voice broke. And I've been lying to him for 11 days, telling him help's coming, telling him someone will take us in, telling him everything's going to be okay. I can't lie to him anymore. I just can't. Jacob thought about Martha, about Emma, about the promises he'd made and broken, about the lies he'd told himself for 6 years. Everything's going to be okay. It was never okay. It was never going to be okay. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was getting through the next hour, the next day, the next breath. Come inside, Jacob said. All of you, before the food gets cold. Carrie's whole body sagged with relief. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. I don't even know your name. Mercer. Jacob Mercer. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. She turned to gather her siblings. Tommy, Sarah, come on. Hank, honey, take my hand. We're going inside. Tommy whooped and ran toward the house. Sarah followed, still clutching at invisible butterflies. Hank moved when Carrie tugged his hand, but his face remained empty. Only Will stayed where he was. Will. Carrie's voice carried a warning. Don't. I don't trust him. You don't have to trust him. You just have to eat. Will's eyes met Jacob's across the yard. The hostility was still there, simmering like coals. But underneath it, Jacob saw something else. Desperation. Exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that came from trying to be strong when everything around you was falling apart. Jacob knew that look. He saw it every morning in the mirror. Your sister's waiting, Jacob said quietly, and the bacon's getting cold. Will held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and followed the others into the house. Jacob stood alone in the yard, the summer sun beating down on his shoulders, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. Inside, the children had already arranged themselves around his table. Carrie was helping Sarah into a chair. Tommy was bouncing in his seat, eyeing the kitchen with barely contained excitement. Hank sat motionless, staring at the wooden surface in front of him. Will had positioned himself near the door, arms crossed, watching Jacob's every move. Sit, Jacob told him. I'm fine standing. Suit yourself. Jacob moved to the stove, where a pan of bacon was already cooling. He'd been about to eat when he'd heard voices outside. When he'd grabbed his shotgun and gone to see who was trespassing. He added more bacon to the pan. Cracked eggs. Cut bread from the loaf on the counter. The familiar motions steadied him, gave him something to focus on, besides the 5 pairs of eyes watching his every movement. You live here alone? Tommy asked. Tommy, Carrie's voice held a warning. What? I'm just asking. It's a big house for one person. Do you got any kids? A wife? A dog? I always wanted a dog. Mama said dogs were too expensive, but I told her I'd feed it scraps from my own plate and… Tommy! Carrie pressed her hand over his mouth. Breathe. Jacob felt something strange twist in his chest. Something that might have been amusement, if he remembered how to feel it. I have a dog, he said, without turning around. Name's Whiskey. He's old, probably sleeping in the barn. Tommy's eyes went wide. Carrie removed her hand, and he immediately said, Can I see him? Can I pet him? Is he friendly? What kind of dog is he? Does he do tricks? After supper. But after supper. Jacob turned with a pan, sliding bacon and eggs onto the plates he'd set out. Eat first. The children didn't need to be told twice. Tommy practically inhaled his food. Sarah picked up her bacon with her fingers and gnawed on it like a little animal. Even Will, still standing by the door, couldn't hide the way his eyes fixed on the plate Carrie brought him. Only Hank didn't move. Carrie cut his food into small pieces, pushed them toward him. Come on, honey, you've got to eat something. Hank didn't respond, didn't look at the food, didn't look at anything. Jacob watched the boy, watched the way Carrie's hands trembled as she tried to coax a bite into his mouth. Watched the way the other children glanced at their brother with a mixture of worry and helplessness. How long? Jacob asked quietly. Carrie looked up. What? How long since he talked? 11 days. Since we found Mama. Carrie's voice was barely a whisper. He was there when it happened. He woke up before me that morning. Found her in bed, not breathing. He was just sitting next to her, holding her hand when I came in, and he hasn't said a word since. Jacob thought about the weeks after Emma died. The weeks he'd spent not talking, not eating, barely breathing. Martha had tried to reach him, had begged him to say something, anything. He hadn't been able to. And then Martha was gone too, and there was no one left to talk to, even if he'd wanted to. "Give him time," Jacob said, and hated how useless the words sounded. "Time's all we've got." Carrie finally managed to get a small piece of bread between Hank's lips. He chewed mechanically, swallowed, returned to staring at nothing. "That's good, honey. That's real good." The meal continued in relative silence. Tommy finished his plate in minutes and started eyeing the pan for more. Jacob scraped out the last of the bacon and eggs without being asked. "Thank you," Carrie said softly, "for the food, for letting us in. I know we're strangers, and I know this isn't—" "I know you don't owe us anything." "You're right, I don't." Will made a sound of disgust from his post by the door. Jacob ignored him. "How'd your mother die?" Carrie flinched. "Does it matter?" "Maybe." "She got sick." Carrie pushed food around her plate. "Started coughing about a month ago. We thought it was just a cold. Then she started coughing blood. The doctor in town said it was consumption. Said there wasn't nothing anyone could do." "And your father?" "Died 2 years ago. Cave-in at the mine where he worked." "So you've been on your own since your mother passed?" "The landlord gave us 3 days to clear out. Said we owed back rent. Said he couldn't afford charity cases." Carrie's voice hardened. "Charity cases. Like we hadn't been paying what we could. Like Mama hadn't worked herself to death doing other people's laundry just to keep a roof over our heads." "Did she work herself to death?" Jacob asked quietly. "Or did the work just make the sickness worse?" Carrie's head snapped up. Her eyes were blazing. "Don't you dare! I'm not judging. I'm asking." The fire went out of her as quickly as it had come. "Both. It was both. She should have rested. The doctor said so. But we needed money. For food. For medicine. For the rent we couldn't afford anyway. So she kept working. And the sickness kept getting worse. And one morning—" She couldn't finish. Jacob nodded slowly. "Consumption's a hard death. I've seen it before. Have you ever watched your mother drown in her own blood?" Will's voice cut across the table. "Have you ever held her hand while she begged God to let her live long enough to see her children safe?" "Will," Carrie whispered, "please." But Will wasn't finished. He pushed off from the wall, stalking toward the table. "You sit there asking questions like we're some kind of puzzle you're trying to figure out. But you don't know nothing about us. You don't know what it's like to watch your family fall apart. You don't know what it's like to be the reason your mother worked herself into a grave." "Will," Carrie was on her feet now. "That's enough." "It's true, though, isn't it? If there hadn't been so many of us to feed, maybe she wouldn't have had to work so hard. Maybe she could have rested like the doctor said. Maybe—" Jacob's hand slammed down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Even Will stopped mid-sentence, his eyes going wide. Jacob stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. He was taller than the boy, broader, and when he spoke, his voice was the coldest thing in the room. "You want to talk about watching family die? You want to talk about guilt?" He pulled open a drawer in the sideboard behind him, pulled out a photograph, threw it on the table in front of Will. "That's my wife, Martha. And that's my daughter, Emma. She was 4 years old when the fever took her. Same age as your sister, Sarah." Will stared down at the photograph. His face had gone pale. "Emma died in 3 days. Healthy one morning, gone by Thursday night. And my wife, she couldn't live with it. Couldn't live in this house, with the memories, with me. So she left, and I've been alone ever since." Jacob leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "So don't you dare stand there and tell me I don't know what it's like to lose everything. Don't you dare act like your pain is special, like nobody else in the world has ever suffered the way you're suffering. Because I've got news for you, boy. Pain is the one thing every human being on this earth has in common. The only thing that matters is what you do with it." Will's hands were shaking. His eyes were wet. "I don't—" his voice cracked. "I didn't mean—" "Yeah, you did." Jacob straightened up. "But I don't hold it against you. Because when I was your age and the world took something from me, I did the same damn thing. Lashed out at anyone who got close. Pushed away anyone who tried to help." He picked up the photograph, looked at it for a long moment, then put it back in the drawer. "The difference between you and me, Will, is that you've still got people who love you, people who need you, your sisters, your brothers. They're counting on you to be strong. And right now, you're wasting energy being angry at strangers when you should be taking care of them." The room was silent. Tommy had stopped chewing. Sarah was looking between Will and Jacob with confused eyes. Hank sat motionless as always. And Carrie was crying quietly, tears sliding down her cheeks. Will looked at his siblings, at the family he'd been trying so hard to protect, at the people who needed him to be better than his anger, better than his fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I'm sorry." Jacob nodded once. "Eat your supper. It's getting cold." Will moved to the table like a sleepwalker. He sat down, picked up his fork, started to eat. And for the first time since they'd arrived, he didn't look angry. He just looked tired. After supper, Jacob showed Tommy the dog. Whiskey was exactly where Jacob had said, curled up in a pile of hay in the corner of the barn. The old dog lifted his head when they approached, tail thumping weakly against the ground. "He's beautiful." Tommy dropped to his knees beside the dog, hands outstretched but not touching, like he was afraid Whiskey might disappear. "Can I pet him? Please, Mr. Mercer." "Go ahead. He's gentle." Tommy's face lit up as his fingers sank into Whiskey's fur. "Oh, he's so soft and warm. Feel this, Sarah." Sarah toddled over and plopped down next to her brother. She patted Whiskey's head with all the coordination of a 4-year-old, which wasn't much. But Whiskey didn't seem to mind. His tail wagged faster. Jacob watched them from the barn door. Carrie had stayed in the house to clean up, despite his protests that she didn't need to. Will had disappeared somewhere, probably to be alone with whatever he was feeling. And Hank was standing a few feet away from the others, watching but not participating. His face was still blank. His hands hung limp at his sides. "Hank," Tommy looked up at his brother. "Come see the dog. He's really nice." Hank didn't move. "Come on, Hank. It'll make you feel better. Dogs always make everything better." Still nothing. Tommy's face fell. He looked at Jacob, something desperate in his eyes. He used to love dogs. Before. He used to chase strays all over town, trying to make friends with them. Mama said he had a gift with animals. Jacob thought about what Carrie had said, about Hank finding their mother's body, about the silence that had swallowed him whole since that morning. He walked over to where Hank stood, crouched down so he was at eye level with the boy. "Hey!" Hank didn't react, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge Jacob's presence in any way. "I heard you like dogs. Is that true?" Nothing. "Whiskey's a good dog. He's been with me a long time, longer than most things in my life. He's good at keeping secrets, good at listening. He never judges you for the things you can't say." Jacob stood up. "You don't have to pet him if you don't want to." But he'll be here when you're ready. Dogs are patient like that. More patient than people." He walked away, gave Hank space, let the boy stand there in his silence, watching his siblings play with a dog he used to dream about. 20 minutes later, when Jacob returned to check on them, Hank was sitting next to Whiskey with his hand on the dog's back. He still wasn't speaking. His face was still empty. But his fingers were moving, slowly, carefully, stroking through the old dog's fur. It was something. Night came with the summer stars spread across the sky like spilled salt. Jacob stood on the porch, watching the last of the light fade from the mountains, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do now. He'd told them one meal. That was all. But supper had stretched into evening, and evening was stretching into night, and somehow nobody had left. Carrie appeared in the doorway behind him. "Mr. Mercer?" "Jacob. Just Jacob." "Jacob," she hesitated. "The little ones are falling asleep. Tommy's already out on the floor by the fireplace, and Sarah's about to follow. I was wondering, I know you said one meal, but is there any way we could stay just for tonight? I'll have everyone up and out before dawn, I promise. We won't be any more trouble." Jacob turned to look at her. In the dim light, she looked even younger than 12. Just a child playing at being an adult because there was no one else left to do it. "Where are you going to go?" he asked. "There's a town about 20 miles south, Cedar Falls. I heard they might have work there. Or maybe... I don't know." Her voice faltered. "I've been making it up as I go, pretending I have a plan when really I'm just trying to get through each day without losing anyone else. That's all any of us are doing." Carrie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's what Mama used to say, near the end, when she knew she wasn't going to make it. She said, 'Carrie, honey, life doesn't care about your plans. It just keeps coming whether you're ready or not. All you can do is hold on and keep your family close.' Smart woman." She was. Too smart for the life she got. Carrie wrapped her arms around herself. "I keep thinking about all the things she deserved. A nice house, pretty dresses, a husband who didn't die in some stupid mine collapse, a daughter who could have taken care of her the way she took care of us. You were taking care of her, right up until the end. Not well enough. You're 12 years old. You did more than most adults would have done." Carrie shook her head. "It wasn't enough. If I'd been smarter, worked harder, figured out some way to make more money..." "Stop." Jacob's voice was sharp. "You're doing the same thing your brother did at dinner. Blaming yourself for things that weren't your fault. Things nobody could have prevented. But your mother got sick. There's no cure for consumption. No amount of money or work or sacrifice would have saved her. You did everything you could, and it still wasn't enough. Because sometimes there is no enough. Sometimes the world just takes and takes and takes, and all you can do is survive." Carrie was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Then what's the point? If we can't save the people we love, if all we can do is watch them die and then keep walking, what's the point of any of it?" Jacob thought about that question. He'd been asking it himself for 6 years, asking it every morning when he woke up in an empty house, every night when he went to sleep alone. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. Maybe there isn't a point. Maybe life is just one loss after another, until you're the one being lowered into the ground." He paused, looked at the stars, looked at this girl who'd walked miles through heat and hostility just to keep her family together. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "the point is what you're doing right now. Protecting the people who depend on you. Giving them a reason to keep going, even when you don't have one yourself. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Be someone else's reason to survive." Carrie wiped her eyes. Do you really believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. But I know that 5 kids showed up at my door today, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't spend the whole evening wishing I was dead. So maybe there's something to it. She stared at him. You wish you were dead? Jacob realized what he'd said. Realized he'd told this 12-year-old girl something he'd never told anyone. Used to, he said quietly. Every day, for a long time. It gets better. Or you get used to it. I'm not sure which. Carrie was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Thank you, she whispered, for being honest. Everyone else just tells us it'll be okay, even when they know it won't be. You told us the truth. The truth isn't always kind. Kind doesn't keep you alive. The truth does. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. We'll be gone by dawn, I promise. Jacob watched her walk back inside, watched the door close behind her. Then he sat down on the porch steps and stayed there until the stars wheeled halfway across the sky, thinking about a little girl with blonde curls and a question that wouldn't stop echoing in his head. Does it get better, mister? He still didn't have an answer. But for the first time in 6 years, he wanted to find one. Jacob woke to the smell of bacon. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Martha used to make bacon on Sunday mornings, back when Sunday mornings meant something. Back when he had reasons to get out of bed that didn't involve feeding livestock or fixing fences. Then he heard the voices. Tommy, stop eating the bacon before it's cooked. But I'm hungry. You're always hungry. Now go set the table. Jacob sat up slowly, his back protesting from a night on the porch. He'd fallen asleep out there sometime before dawn, too tired to move, too stubborn to go inside, where 5 children had taken over his house. 5 children who were supposed to be gone by now. He pushed through the front door and stopped dead. Carrie was at the stove, handling the bacon like she'd been cooking in this kitchen her whole life. Tommy was laying out plates on the table, counting under his breath. Sarah was sitting on the floor playing with Whiskey, who had somehow made his way inside during the night. Will was hauling water from the pump outside, and Hank was standing by the window, watching everything with those empty eyes. Mr. Mercer! Carrie turned when she heard the door, her face flushed red. I'm sorry. I know I said we'd be gone by dawn, but the little ones were so tired, and I thought maybe I could make breakfast first to thank you for everything, and then we'd go. I promise we'd go, but— How long have you been awake? A few hours. I couldn't sleep much anyway. Jacob looked at the table, at the bacon sizzling in the pan, at his kitchen, which had been empty and silent for 6 years, now full of noise and movement and life. You found the eggs, he said. I hope that's okay. There were fresh ones in the hen house. Tommy helped me collect them. Carrie was talking fast, nervous. I can pay you back. I mean, not with money, but I can work. I can clean, cook, whatever you need. We all can. Carrie. Please, don't be angry. I know we overstayed. I know I broke my promise. But Sarah was crying in her sleep, and Hank, he actually pet the dog last night. He actually moved on his own, and I couldn't wake them up. I just couldn't. Carrie. Jacob's voice cut through her rambling. Stop. She stopped. Her hands were shaking. Jacob walked to the stove, looked at the bacon, perfectly crisped, looked at the eggs she'd scrambled in his mother's old cast-iron pan, looked at this girl who'd been through hell and was still trying to take care of everyone around her. You burned the toast, he said. Carrie's face crumpled. I'm sorry. The stove runs hotter than I'm used to, and I'll show you how to adjust the damper. Jacob moved past her to the bread she'd set aside. Otherwise, the heat's uneven. Burns everything on one side. Carrie stared at him. You're not angry? Should I be? We were supposed to leave. You were supposed to eat breakfast first. That was the deal. Jacob grabbed a knife and started cutting fresh bread. Can't travel on an empty stomach. The relief that flooded Carrie's face made something twist in Jacob's chest. This girl had been bracing for rejection, for anger, for another door slammed in her face. The fact that she'd expected it, that she'd clearly experienced it enough times to expect it, made him angrier than the burnt toast ever could. Breakfast was a loud affair. Tommy talked non-stop about whiskey, about the chickens, about the horse he'd seen in the barn, about everything and nothing all at once. Sarah demanded that whiskey sit next to her, and when the old dog complied, she fed him scraps under the table when she thought nobody was looking. Will ate in silence, but the hostility from last night had faded. He looked tired, wrung out, like the anger had burned through him and left nothing but ash. Hank still didn't speak, but when Carrie put food in front of him, he picked up his fork without being told. "Small victories," Carrie murmured, catching Jacob's eye. "That's what Mama always said. Count the small victories." After breakfast, Jacob made his decision. He didn't plan it, didn't think it through. The words just came out, the same way they had yesterday, when he'd lowered his shotgun instead of sending 5 children away to die. "You can stay." Everyone stopped moving. "What?" Carrie's voice was barely a whisper. "You heard me. You can stay. For now. Until we figure out something better." "But," Carrie shook her head, "you don't even know us. We're strangers. We showed up at your door yesterday and you pointed a gun at us." "I remember." "Then why?" Jacob looked at them, at Tommy's hopeful face, at Sarah's innocent eyes, at Will's cautious suspicion, at Hank's empty stare, at Carrie, who was holding herself together with nothing but willpower and prayer. "Because you need help," he said, "and because I've got room." "That's not a reason." "It's reason enough." Will stepped forward. "This is a trick. It has to be. Nobody just takes in 5 kids out of nowhere." "Will," Carrie warned. "No, Carrie, think about it. What's he getting out of this? Free labor? We work his ranch for nothing, and he gets to feel good about himself?" "That's not," Carrie started. "Actually," Jacob interrupted, "that's exactly what I was thinking." Everyone stared at him. "You need a place to stay. I need help with the ranch. It's a fair trade." Jacob crossed his arms. "I'm not running a charity here. You want to stay? You work. Everyone old enough to pull their weight pulls it. That includes you, Will." Will's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of work." "Good, because there's plenty of it. Fences need mending. Animals need feeding. Firewood needs chopping. Think you can handle that?" "I can handle anything you throw at me." "We'll see." Jacob turned to Carrie. "You seem to know your way around a kitchen. You can take over the cooking. I've been living on burnt beans and bad coffee for longer than I care to admit." Carrie nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Tommy," Jacob looked at the 8-year-old. "You said you're good with animals?" Tommy's face lit up. "Yes, sir. The best. Mama always said." "Good. You're on chicken duty. Feeding, collecting eggs, keeping the coop clean. Think you can manage?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. You won't regret this, sir." "And Sarah?" Jacob looked at the little girl, who was watching him with those big eyes. "Sarah can help Carrie in the house. Sweeping, dusting, whatever small jobs need doing." "I can sweep real good," Sarah announced. "Mama taught me." "Then you'll do just fine." Jacob's gaze shifted to Hank, still standing motionless by the window. "And Hank can help with the dog. Whiskey's old. He needs someone to look after him." Carrie's breath caught. "You trust him with your dog?" "Whiskey could use a friend. So could the boy, from what I can tell." Silence fell over the kitchen. The children looked at each other, then at Carrie, waiting for her to make the decision they all knew was hers to make. "What's the catch?" Carrie asked quietly. There's always a catch. No catch, just rules. Jacob held up a finger. 1. You do what I say, when I say it. This is still my ranch, and I know how to run it better than you do. Carrie nodded. 2. You don't lie to me. Ever. About anything. I find out you've been lying, you're gone. All of you. Another nod. 3. Jacob paused. You don't give up on each other. Whatever happens, you stick together. That's what your mama wanted, right? Then that's what we do. Carrie's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. That's not a rule. That's a promise. It's both. Jacob extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Carrie looked at his hand, at her siblings, at the house that might become their home. Then she reached out and shook. Deal. Tommy whooped. Sarah clapped her hands. Even Will's face softened slightly, though he tried to hide it. And Hank, standing by the window, with the sunlight falling across his face, turned his head just slightly toward the sound of his siblings' joy. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first week was chaos. Tommy broke 3 eggs his first day collecting them, then cried so hard that Carrie had to stop cooking to comfort him. Will picked a fight with Jacob over the proper way to swing an axe, then sulked for 2 hours when Jacob proved his point by splitting 3 times as many logs in half the time. Sarah got into the flour bin and covered herself head to toe in white powder, looking like a tiny ghost when Carrie found her. And Hank, silent as ever, wandered off toward the creek and didn't come back until sunset, sending everyone into a panic. But by the second week, things started to settle. Tommy learned to carry eggs like they were made of glass. Will stopped arguing with every instruction and started actually listening, though he still muttered under his breath when he thought Jacob couldn't hear. Sarah discovered that sweeping was more fun if you pretended the dust was enemy soldiers being vanquished from the kingdom. And Hank, though he still didn't speak, started following Whiskey everywhere, the old dog padding along beside him like a furry shadow. He's getting better, Carrie said one evening, watching Hank through the kitchen window. The boy was sitting on the porch steps, Whiskey's head in his lap, his fingers moving slowly through the dog's fur. Not talking yet, but better. More present. Does that make sense? Makes sense. Jacob set down the harness he'd been mending. Grief takes time. It doesn't follow a schedule. Is that what happened to you? After your wife and daughter? Carrie hesitated. I'm sorry. I shouldn't pry. You're not prying. You're asking. Jacob's hand stilled on the leather. And yes, after Martha and Emma died, I shut down. Didn't talk to anyone for months. Didn't leave this ranch for almost a year. People thought I'd gone crazy. Maybe I had. But you came back, eventually. Came back from where? I never went anywhere. You know what I mean. You started living again. Even if it was just surviving, you kept going. Jacob thought about that, about the years of emptiness, about the mornings he'd woken up angry that he'd woken up at all. I don't know if I'd call it living, he said slowly. More like waiting. I've been waiting for 6 years, and I never figured out what I was waiting for. Maybe you were waiting for us. The words hit Jacob harder than they should have. He looked up and found Carrie watching him with those 2 old eyes. Maybe, he allowed. Or maybe you just showed up at the right time. Same thing, isn't it? Before Jacob could answer, the front door burst open. Tommy came flying through, his face flushed, his breath coming in gasps. Mr. Mercer, come quick! Jacob was on his feet instantly. What's wrong? It's men, on horses, coming up the road, 3 of them, and they look mean. Jacob grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door and was outside before Tommy finished speaking. Carrie followed, pulling Sarah behind her, calling for Will and Hank. 3 riders were approaching from the east, silhouetted against the setting sun. Jacob couldn't make out their faces yet, but Tommy was right about one thing. They didn't look friendly. "Kids, inside, now!" "But," Will started, "now!" Carrie herded her siblings through the door, but Jacob caught her arm before she could follow. "Keep them quiet, keep them low, and if something happens to me, there's a back way through the kitchen into the barn. Take the horse and ride south. Don't stop until you hit Cedar Falls." Carrie's face went white. "Jacob." "Promise me." "I promise." She disappeared inside. Jacob heard the bolt slide home behind him. Then he turned to face whoever was coming up his road. The riders pulled up 20 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to be out of easy reach. The one in front was big, wide shoulders, thick neck, a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and left out in the weather too long. He wore a star on his chest. "Jacob Mercer," the man said. Not a question. "That's right. I'm Sheriff Bill Dawson, out of Silver Creek." He jerked his thumb at the 2 men behind him. "These are my deputies. We're here about some children." Jacob's grip tightened on his rifle. "What about them?" "Word is you've taken in 5 orphans, the Holloway kids. That correct?" "And if it is?" Sheriff Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Then we've got a problem, because those children are wards of the territory now, property of the state, legally speaking. And the state's got plans for them." "What kind of plans?" "Orphanage in Helena. It's all arranged. We're here to collect them and transport them to the proper authorities." Jacob felt something cold settle in his chest. "On whose authority?" "Territorial authority. Judge signed the order 2 days ago." Dawson pulled a folded paper from his coat. "It's all legal and proper. Now I don't want any trouble here, Mercer. Just hand over the children and we'll be on our way." "And if I don't?" Dawson's expression hardened. "Then we take them anyway, and you spend the night in my jail for obstructing justice." Jacob looked at the paper in the sheriff's hand. Looked at the 2 deputies, both armed, both watching him with the easy confidence of men who expected to win. Looked at the house behind him, where 5 children were hiding, probably terrified, probably remembering every other time someone had tried to tear them apart. "Those children aren't going anywhere." Dawson sighed. "Now, Mercer, they've been through hell. They lost their mother 11 days ago. They walked 6 days through summer heat with no food and barely any water. They came to my door half dead, and I took them in. You want to drag them to some institution where they'll be split up and forgotten? You're going to have to go through me first." One of the deputies snorted. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you." "I can count." "Then you should know you're outgunned." "Probably." Jacob raised his rifle, not quite pointing it at anyone, but making his intentions clear. "But here's the thing about being outgunned. You might win, but you're not walking away clean. One of you is going down before I do, maybe 2. So the question is, which one of you wants to be the unlucky one?" The deputies exchanged glances. Dawson held up his hand to keep them in place. "This is foolishness, Mercer. You can't fight the law." "I'm not fighting the law. I'm protecting children. There's a difference. The law says those kids belong in an orphanage. The law doesn't give a damn that their mother made them promise to stay together. The law doesn't care that the youngest one hasn't spoken since she watched her mother die. The law sees 5 problems to be processed, not 5 human beings who need a home." Jacob's voice dropped. "Well, I see them, and I'm not letting you take them." Silence stretched between them. The horses shifted. Somewhere in the distance a crow called. Then a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here, Sheriff?" Everyone turned. A woman was approaching on horseback from the north, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face weathered by decades of sun and wind. She sat in the saddle like she'd been born there. "Martha Finch." Dawson's voice carried a note of wariness. "This doesn't concern you." "Everything that happens in my county concerns me." The woman pulled up beside Jacob, her horse nearly shoulder to shoulder with his position. "Now, I asked if there was a problem." "No problem. Just collecting some orphans for transport to Helena." "Orphans?" Martha's eyes swept over the scene, taking in Jacob's rifle, the deputies' hands hovering near their weapons, the tension thick enough to cut. "You mean the Holloway children?" "You know them?" "I know of them. Heard they'd taken up with Mercer here." She looked at Jacob with sharp eyes. "That true?" "It's true." "And you're planning to keep them?" "If the law allows." Martha turned back to Dawson. "There's your answer, Sheriff. The children have a guardian. No need for the orphanage." Dawson's face reddened. "Now hold on. Mercer isn't their legal guardian. He's just some hermit who took them in when nobody else would." Martha's voice cut like a whip. "Who's been feeding them, housing them, keeping them safe? That sounds like a guardian to me." "That's not how the law works, Martha." "Then maybe the law needs to work differently." She leaned forward in her saddle. "I've known you 20 years, Bill Dawson. You're not a bad man. But you're about to do a bad thing. Taking those children from the only stability they've got, shipping them off to some cold institution where they'll be treated like numbers instead of people. Is that really what you want on your conscience?" Dawson hesitated. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked uncertain. "The judge signed the order," he said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "Judges can unsign orders. Papers can be filed. Hearings can be held. The law is flexible when it wants to be." Martha's eyes bored into him. "Give these children a chance, Bill. Give Mercer a chance. If it doesn't work out, you can come back with your papers and your deputies. But don't tear this family apart before they've even had a chance to become one." The silence stretched. Jacob held his breath. Everything hung on this moment, on the decision of a man who had the power to destroy everything they'd started building. Finally, Dawson exhaled. "1 month," he said. "I'll give you 1 month to file for proper guardianship. If it's not done by then, I'm coming back with more than 3 men." "That's all we're asking." Dawson looked at Jacob one more time. "You better know what you're getting into, Mercer. 5 kids is a lot of responsibility." "I know. And if you hurt them, if anything happens to them under your care, I'll personally make sure you regret it." "Understood." Dawson turned his horse. His deputies followed. Within minutes, they were just dust on the horizon. Jacob lowered his rifle. His hands were shaking. "That was stupid," Martha said matter-of-factly. "Taking on 3 armed men by yourself. You could have gotten killed." "Probably. Then why do it?" Jacob thought about 5 children huddled inside his house. About promises made and promises kept. About a little girl who'd asked if he was going to shoot them, and a boy who hadn't spoken in 11 days. "Because someone had to," he said. Martha studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, just slightly. "Maybe you're not as far gone as people say, Jacob Mercer." She turned her horse toward the road. "I'll be back tomorrow. We've got paperwork to file if you're serious about keeping those children." "I'm serious." "Good. Because I meant what I said to Dawson. 1 month isn't much time. You're going to need help." "Why?" Jacob called after her. "Why help us? You don't even know those kids." Martha paused, looking back over her shoulder. "I lost 2 sons in the war. 3 grandchildren to scarlet fever. My husband drank himself into an early grave trying to forget. I know exactly what it's like to lose everyone you love and keep waking up anyway." Her voice softened. Maybe that's why I can't stand by and watch it happen to someone else." She rode away without another word. Jacob stood in the yard, watching until she disappeared, then turned toward the house. The door opened before he reached it. Carrie stood there, tears streaming down her face. The other children crowded behind her. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Are they gone?" "They're gone, for now." "What do you mean, for now?" Jacob climbed the porch steps, looked at the 5 faces staring up at him with hope and fear and everything in between. "It means we've got 1 month to make this official," he said. 1 month to prove to a judge that I'm fit to be your guardian. 1 month to convince a bunch of strangers that this arrangement, whatever it is worth fighting for." "And if we can't?" Will's voice was quiet, scared. Jacob looked at the boy, at all of them. "Then we try again, and again, and as many times as it takes." He put his hand on Carrie's shoulder. "I told you I'm not letting anyone take you. I meant it." Carrie threw her arms around him. Jacob froze. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had hugged him. The sensation was strange and uncomfortable, and somehow exactly what he needed. One by one, the others joined. Tommy first, then Sarah, then Will reluctantly, drawn in by his siblings' gravity. Only Hank stayed back, watching from the doorway with whiskey at his side. But when Jacob looked at him, the boy did something unexpected. He nodded, just once, just barely. It was the first time Hank had acknowledged anyone directly since his mother died. And standing there in the summer evening, surrounded by children who weren't his blood, but were somehow becoming his family, Jacob Mercer felt something crack open in his chest. Something that felt like hope. Martha Finch arrived at dawn the next morning, just like she'd promised. Jacob was already in the barn when he heard hoofbeats on the road. He set down the pitchfork and walked outside to find the old woman climbing down from her horse with the efficiency of someone half her age. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Didn't sleep much." "I imagine not." Martha tied her horse to the post and pulled a leather satchel from her saddlebag. "I brought paperwork. Lots of it. The territorial court doesn't make anything easy, especially when it comes to custody matters." "I figured as much." They walked toward the house together. Martha's eyes swept over the property, taking in the mended fences, the freshly painted barn door, the vegetable garden that had been neglected for years, but now showed signs of recent attention. "You've been busy," she observed. "The kids needed something to do. Idle hands and all that." Martha didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe you needed something to do. Something besides sitting alone in that house, waiting to die." Jacob didn't answer. He didn't have to. Inside, Carrie had already started breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the kitchen, and the other children were scattered around the table in various states of wakefulness. Tommy was chattering about a dream he'd had. Sarah was feeding scraps to Whiskey under the table. Will was staring into his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. And Hank sat motionless by the window, watching the sunrise with empty eyes. "Children," Martha's voice cut through the morning noise. "I'm Martha Finch. I'm here to help Mr. Mercer keep you out of that orphanage." Everyone went quiet. "How?" Carrie asked carefully. "By filing the proper paperwork. By building a case for guardianship. By convincing a judge that this arrangement is in your best interest." Martha set her satchel on the table with a thump. "It won't be easy. The territorial court has strict requirements for guardianship, especially when the potential guardian is an unmarried man with no previous experience raising children." "But it's possible?" Hope flickered in Carrie's voice. "Possible, not guaranteed." Martha pulled out a stack of papers. "We'll need character witnesses. People who can vouch for Mr. Mercer's fitness as a guardian. We'll need proof that you're being properly cared for, fed and clothed, educated, kept safe. And we'll need to address the elephant in the room. Which is? Jacob asked. Martha looked at him squarely. You're a single man. No wife. No female presence in the household. The court will see that as a significant concern, especially with 2 young girls in your care. Jacob felt his jaw tighten. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting I move in. The words landed like a stone in still water. What? Jacob's voice came out sharper than he intended. Just temporarily. Until the guardianship is finalized. Martha held up a hand before he could protest. I'm not asking for your permission, Mercer. I'm telling you what needs to happen if you want to keep these children. The court needs to see a stable household with proper supervision. My presence provides that. We don't need a babysitter, Will muttered. No, you need a strategy. Martha fixed him with a look that made even Will shrink back slightly. I've dealt with territorial courts before. I know how they think, what they look for, what convinces them, and what doesn't. Without me, your chances drop from slim to none. Jacob looked at Carrie, at the other children, at the paperwork spread across his table like a challenge. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. But this is still my house, my ranch, my rules. Wouldn't have it any other way, Martha almost smiled. Now, let's get to work. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Martha was relentless. She drilled Jacob on what to say to the judge, how to present himself, what to wear, how to stand. She worked with Carrie on household management, teaching her skills that would impress any inspector who came calling. She put Will to work on projects that would demonstrate his value to the ranch, building a new chicken coop, repairing the root cellar, tasks that showed responsibility and commitment. Even Tommy and Sarah were recruited. Martha had them practice their manners until they could recite please and thank you in their sleep. She taught Sarah to curtsy and Tommy to shake hands properly, little touches that might sway a judge's opinion. Only Hank remained outside her efforts. The boy needs a doctor, Martha said one evening after the children had gone to bed. His silence isn't normal grief. There's something deeper going on. Carrie said he was like this after they found their mother. Trauma can do strange things to a child's mind. I've seen it before. Martha's voice softened slightly. During the war, after my sons died, my youngest grandson stopped talking for almost 2 years. The doctors called it hysteria, said he might never speak again. Did he? Eventually, but it took time, and patience, and a lot of love. Jacob looked toward the bedroom where the children were sleeping. I'm not sure I know how to give that. You're already giving it. You just don't recognize it yet. A week into Martha's stay, they had their first real crisis. Jacob was in the barn when he heard Sarah scream. He dropped everything and ran. The sound had come from the house, high and terrified, the kind of scream that meant something was seriously wrong. He burst through the front door to find chaos. Sarah was huddled in the corner, sobbing. Tommy was standing frozen in the middle of the room. Will had positioned himself in front of his siblings, fists raised, facing down a stranger who'd apparently let himself in through the back door. The stranger was tall and lean, with a face like a weasel and clothes that had seen better decades. He was holding a bottle in one hand and swaying slightly on his feet. "Well, well," the man slurred. "Look at all these little rats. Heard there was children here. Didn't believe it till now. Get out." Will's voice shook, but he held his ground. "Get out of our house." "Your house?" The man laughed, an ugly sound that echoed off the walls. "This ain't your house, boy. This here's Jacob Mercer's place. And last I checked, Mercer don't like children." So what are you doing here, Stealing from him? Running some kind of scam? They live here. Jacob's voice came from the doorway, cold as winter. Which is more than I can say for you. Get out, Emmett. The man, Emmett, turned with exaggerated slowness. Jacob, long time no see. Heard you'd gone soft, but I didn't believe it. The great Jacob Mercer, hermit of the territory, taking in strays like some kind of charity work.
I said, get out. Or what? You'll shoot me like you shot those rustlers back in '78?
Emmett took a step closer, his breath reeking of whiskey, even from across the room. I remember you, Mercer. Remember what you were before you crawled into this hole and gave up on life. You were hard, dangerous, the kind of man other men crossed the street to avoid. That was a long time ago. Was it? Because I'm looking at you now, and I still see it. That killer behind your eyes. You think these children don't see it too? You think they don't know what kind of man they're living with? Will's fists dropped slightly. His eyes flickered to Jacob with something new in them. Uncertainty. Fear. Jacob felt the weight of his past pressing down on him. The things he'd done before Martha and Emma had softened him. The violence that had seemed so necessary at the time and so shameful in retrospect. What do you want, Emmett? Money.
What else? Times are hard, and I remember you owe me from that card game in '82.
I don't owe you anything. You cheated that game, and we both know it. Emmett's face twisted. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you a cheat, a drunk, and a coward who threatens children because he's too scared to face a real fight. Jacob took a step forward. Now get out of my house before I throw you out. For a moment, nobody moved. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Emmett laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time, only menace. Fine, I'll go. But this ain't over, Mercer, not by a long shot. He stumbled toward the back door, pausing to look at the children one more time. You kids better watch yourselves. The man you're living with? He's got more blood on his hands than you can imagine. Ask him about the Dawson gang sometime. Ask him how many men he killed that night. The door slammed behind him. Silence filled the room. Sarah was still crying.
Tommy had gone pale. Will was staring at Jacob like he was seeing him for the first time.
Is it true? Will's voice was barely a whisper. What he said about you? Jacob closed his eyes. He'd known this moment would come eventually, had dreaded it since the day the children arrived. Some of it, he admitted. You killed people? Yes. How many? Enough. Carrie appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, Martha close behind. They'd clearly heard everything. Jacob, Carrie said carefully, maybe we should talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. Jacob's voice was flat. Emmett told the truth. Before I met Martha, my wife, I was a different man. I did things I'm not proud of. Some of them were necessary. Some of them weren't. All of them haunt me. But you changed, Carrie pressed. You're not that man anymore. Am I not? Jacob looked at his hands, the same hands that had pulled triggers, thrown punches, ended lives. Those men are still dead. Their families still mourn them. Nothing I do now can change that. People aren't defined by their worst moments, Martha said quietly. They're defined by what they do after, by how they try to make amends. Some things can't be amended. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. Will hadn't moved. His fists were clenched at his sides, his jaw working as he processed everything he'd just learned. You should have told us, he finally said, before we agreed to stay. You should have told us who you really are. Would it have made a difference? I don't know. Will's voice cracked. Maybe. I don't know. He turned and walked out the front door, leaving it swinging behind him. Jacob moved to follow, but Martha caught his arm. Give him time. He's just had his whole understanding of you turned upside down. He needs to process it on his own. What if he doesn't come back? What if he takes the others and leaves? Then that's his choice. You can't force someone to trust you. You can only give them reasons to. Jacob stood in the doorway, watching Will's retreating figure disappear toward the barn. Everything he'd built over the past weeks felt like it was crumbling around him. I should never have let them stay, he said quietly. They deserve better than me. Maybe, Martha agreed, but they need you anyway. Life's funny like that. An hour later, Will came back. Jacob was sitting on the porch, waiting, when the boy emerged from the barn. Will's face was tear-streaked, though he was trying to hide it. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at Jacob with red-rimmed eyes. I want to know, Will said. All of it. Every terrible thing you did. Every person you hurt. I want to know who you really are. Jacob considered refusing, considered deflecting, considered lying. Instead, he told the truth. He told Will about his childhood, about growing up poor and angry, about learning to fight before he learned to read. He told him about the years after he left home, drifting from town to town, taking whatever work he could find, most of it violent. He told him about the Dawson gang, about the night he'd killed 3 men in a shootout that had started over nothing and ended in blood. He told him about the nightmares that followed, the guilt that never faded, the slow realization that he was becoming someone he hated. And he told him about Martha, about meeting a woman who saw past the violence to something worth saving, about building a life that was supposed to be different, about Emma, who had looked at him with such pure love that he'd actually believed he could be the man she thought he was. Then they died, Jacob said quietly, and I realized the universe was right all along. I didn't deserve happiness. I didn't deserve a family. The things I'd done, they had consequences, and my wife and daughter paid the price for my sins. Will was quiet for a long time. That's not how it works, he finally said. Bad things don't happen because someone deserves them. They just happen. Maybe. No, not maybe. Definitely. Will sat down on the steps beside Jacob. Our mother was a good person, better than anyone I've ever known. She never hurt anyone, never did anything wrong. And she still died. She still left us alone. If bad things only happened to bad people, she'd still be alive. Jacob looked at the boy, at the wisdom that had no business existing in someone so young. When did you get so smart? I'm not smart. I'm just tired of being angry all the time. Will stared at his hands. I've been angry since Pa died. Angry at him for leaving us. Angry at Mama for getting sick. Angry at God for not saving her. Angry at everyone who turned us away when we needed help. And now? Now I'm just tired. Will looked up at Jacob. You're not a good man, I know that now. But you're trying to be. That's more than most people do. It's not enough. Maybe not, but it's something. Will stood up. I'm not going to tell the others about the Dawson gang. They don't need to know. Carrie's got enough to worry about, and the little ones wouldn't understand anyway. Will, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for them. They need to believe in something right now. They need to believe that this can work, that we can be a family. Will's voice hardened. But if you ever hurt them, if you ever do anything to break their trust, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Understood? Jacob met the boy's eyes, saw the steel there. the promise. Understood. Will nodded once, then walked into the house without looking back. Jacob sat alone on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains. He thought about second chances, about whether they were real or just stories people told themselves to get through the night. He didn't have an answer. But for the first time in 6 years, he wanted to find one. The weeks that followed were tense, but productive. Martha worked tirelessly on the guardianship paperwork, gathering documents, writing statements, building a case that would withstand judicial scrutiny. She recruited character witnesses from around the territory, people who knew Jacob's reputation, but were willing to speak to his potential for change. Reverend Thomas from Silver Creek agreed to testify. So did Doc Williams, who'd treated Jacob after a horse kicked him 3 years back. Even Sheriff Dawson, grudgingly, admitted that Jacob had been a model citizen since his wife's death. "Doesn't mean I trust him with children," Dawson told Martha. "But I can't say he's done anything wrong." "That's all we need," Martha replied. "For now." The children adapted to their new reality in different ways. Carrie threw herself into household management, taking over more and more responsibilities until Jacob barely recognized his own kitchen. She organized, cleaned, cooked, and managed with an efficiency that would have impressed a military commander. Will worked alongside Jacob on the ranch, learning the skills he'd need if this arrangement became permanent. He was still guarded, still wary, but the open hostility had faded into something more like cautious respect. Tommy found joy wherever he could. He'd adopted the chickens as his personal friends, naming each one and talking to them like they were people. His laughter echoed across the ranch, a sound that had been missing from this place for far too long. Sarah blossomed under the attention and stability. She followed Carrie everywhere, helping with chores, learning to cook simple dishes, playing with whiskey until the old dog was exhausted. And Hank remained silent. But there were changes, small ones, that only someone paying close attention would notice. He started sitting with the family at meals, instead of by the window. He began following Jacob to the barn in the mornings, watching him work with the horses. He spent hours with whiskey, the two of them sitting together in comfortable silence. One evening, Jacob found him in the barn, standing in front of Emma's old rocking horse. The toy had been sitting in the corner for 6 years, covered in dust, untouched since the day she died. Jacob had never been able to throw it away, but he'd never been able to look at it either. Hank was looking at it now. His small hand reached out and touched the faded mane. "That belonged to my daughter," Jacob said quietly, not wanting to startle him. "Emma. She used to ride it every day, pretended she was a cowgirl, riding across the prairie, saving the world from bandits." Hank didn't respond, but he didn't pull his hand away either. "She was about your age when she died. Little older, maybe." Jacob moved to stand beside the boy. "She would have liked you, I think. She liked quiet people. Said they were easier to trust than the loud ones." Hank's fingers traced the worn leather of the saddle. "It's okay to be quiet," Jacob continued. "It's okay to not have words for what you're feeling. Some things are too big for words. They just have to sit inside you until you're ready to let them out." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Hank turned and pressed his face against Jacob's side. It wasn't a hug exactly, more like a leaning, a seeking of warmth and comfort and safety from someone who had none of those things to give, but was trying to give them anyway. Jacob put his hand on the boy's head, felt the small body trembling against him. "I've got you," he said softly. "You're safe now. I promise." Hank didn't speak, but for the first time since his mother died, he cried. The tears came silently at first, then harder, shaking his whole body with the force of grief too long suppressed. Jacob knelt down and held him, letting the boy sob against his shoulder, not trying to fix anything or make it better, just being there. When the tears finally stopped, Hank pulled back and looked at Jacob with eyes that weren't empty anymore. They were sad, wounded, broken, but alive. "There you are," Jacob whispered. "There you are." Hank's mouth opened, closed, opened again, and then, in a voice rusty from weeks of disuse, he spoke. "Mama." Just one word, just a name, but it was enough. Jacob pulled the boy close again and held him while the stars came out over Montana, and somewhere in the house, Carrie was calling them for supper, and Whiskey was barking, and Tommy was laughing, and for one perfect moment, everything felt like it might actually be okay. The courtroom in Silver Creek was smaller than Jacob had expected. He'd imagined something grand, something intimidating, with high ceilings and polished wood and all the trappings of official authority. Instead, he found a cramped room above the general store, with mismatched chairs and a judge's bench that looked like it had been salvaged from a church. Judge Harrison Pierce sat behind that bench, a thin man in his 60s, with spectacles perched on his nose and eyes that missed nothing. He'd traveled 3 days from Helena specifically for this hearing, and he didn't look happy about it. "This is highly irregular," Pierce said, shuffling through the papers Martha had submitted. "A single man seeking guardianship of 5 unrelated children. I've never seen anything like it." "With respect, Your Honor," Martha replied from her seat beside Jacob, "the law doesn't prohibit such arrangements. It merely requires proof that the guardian can provide adequate care." "And you believe Mr. Mercer can provide such care? I've been living in his household for 3 weeks. I've seen how he treats those children. I've seen how they've flourished under his care. Yes, Your Honor, I believe he can." Pierce's eyes shifted to Jacob. "Mr. Mercer, why do you want these children?" Jacob had prepared for this question. Martha had drilled him on what to say, how to say it, what words would impress the judge, and which would damn him. But sitting here now, with everything on the line, the rehearsed answers felt hollow. "I don't want them," he said. Martha's sharp intake of breath was audible. Pierce's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "I don't want them," Jacob repeated. "Not the way you mean. I didn't go looking for children. I didn't plan any of this. They showed up at my door half dead, and I let them in, because sending them away would have killed them. And now? Now, I can't imagine my life without them." Jacob's voice cracked slightly. "They're not mine by blood. They never will be. But they're mine anyway. They're my responsibility, my family, and I'll fight anyone who tries to take them from me." Pierce studied him for a long moment. "You have a reputation, Mr. Mercer. Not all of it flattering." "I know. There are people in this territory who remember you as a violent man, a dangerous man." "I was, a long time ago." "And what changed?" Jacob thought about Martha, about Emma, about the children sleeping in his house right now, waiting to learn if they'd be allowed to stay. "I met someone who made me want to be better. And when I lost her, I had 2 choices. Become the man I used to be, or honor her memory by staying the man she helped me become." He paused. "I chose the second. I'm still choosing it, every day." Pierce made a note on his papers. "I've read the character testimonies. Reverend Thomas speaks highly of you. So does Dr. Williams. Even Sheriff Dawson, though with notable reservations." "Sheriff Dawson doesn't trust me." "I don't blame him." "Do you think you deserve his trust?" "No, but those children deserve a home, and right now, I'm the only one offering." The judge turned to Martha. "Mrs. Finch, you've agreed to remain in the household as a chaperone. How long do you intend to stay?" "As long as necessary, Your Honor. Until the children are grown, if that's what it takes." "That's a significant commitment. Those children are worth it. Pierce nodded slowly. He shuffled more papers, made more notes, the scratch of his pen the only sound in the room. Then he looked up. "I'd like to speak with the children." Jacob's stomach dropped. "Is that necessary?" "It's essential. These children are old enough to have opinions about their own future. I want to hear those opinions directly." Pierce gestured to the bailiff. "Bring them in." The door opened. Carrie entered first, her shoulders back, her chin lifted, looking older than her 12 years. Will followed, his face carefully neutral, hiding whatever he was feeling beneath a mask of calm. Tommy came next, practically bouncing with nervous energy, unable to stay still even in a courtroom. Sarah held Carrie's hand, her eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. And finally, Hank. The boy walked in slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. He'd been speaking more in the weeks since that night in the barn. Single words, short phrases. Nothing like the chatterbox Tommy, but every word felt like a victory. "Children," Judge Pierce said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Do you know why you're here?" Carrie nodded. "To decide if we get to stay with Mr. Mercer." "That's right. And I want to hear from each of you, starting with you, Miss Holloway. Do you want to stay with Mr. Mercer?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" Carrie glanced at Jacob, then back at the judge. "Because he's the first person who didn't make us feel like a burden. When we showed up at his door, we were starving and scared and half dead. He could have turned us away. Everyone else did. But he let us in. He fed us. He gave us a home." "And you trust him?" "More than anyone except my brothers and sister." Pierce made a note. "William, same question." Will stood straighter. "Yes, I want to stay." "You don't sound entirely certain." "I'm certain about wanting to stay with my siblings. Wherever they go, I go. That's not negotiable." Will paused. "As for Mr. Mercer, he's not perfect. He's done things he's not proud of. But he's trying to be better. And that counts for something." "What things has he done that he's not proud of?" Will's jaw tightened. Jacob held his breath. "Things from before," Will said carefully. "Before he met his wife. Before he had a daughter. He was a different person then. People can change, Your Honor. I've seen it." Pierce nodded slowly. "Thomas, what about you?" Tommy's face lit up.
"Oh, I definitely want to stay. Mr. Mercer has a dog named Whiskey and chickens that I get to feed every day. And there's a horse that he says I can learn to ride when I'm older. And the food is really good. Carrie cooks now, but Mr. Mercer taught her how to make the stove work right. And there's a creek where we go fishing sometimes. And Will caught a fish this big."
"Tommy." Carrie's voice was gentle but firm. "Breathe." Tommy took a breath. "Sorry. I talk a lot when I'm nervous. Mama always said I could talk the ears off a mule. But yes, Your Honor, I want to stay. Please don't make us leave." Pierce's lips twitched. "I'll take that under advisement. Sarah?" Sarah pressed closer to Carrie's side. Her voice came out small, barely audible. "I like it here. Mr. Mercer doesn't yell. And Whiskey lets me pet him. And Carrie says we're safe now." "Do you feel safe?" Sarah nodded vigorously. "And you, young man?" Pierce looked at Hank. "Do you want to stay with Mr. Mercer?" Hank didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. "The boy doesn't speak much," Jacob said quickly. "He's been through trauma. His mother—" "Let him answer." Pierce's voice was firm but not unkind. "Son, look at me." Slowly, Hank raised his head. His eyes met the judge's. "Do you want to stay with Mr. Mercer?" Silence stretched across the courtroom. Jacob felt his heart pounding against his ribs. Then, Hank spoke. "He saved us." 3 words, barely a whisper, but in that cramped room above the general store, they echoed like thunder. "He saved us," Hank repeated, stronger this time. "We were going to die. Nobody wanted us, but he let us in. He kept us warm. He let me pet his dog." The boy's voice cracked. "He held me when I cried for Mama. He said I was safe. I want to stay with him. Please, please let us stay." The room had gone absolutely still. Jacob stared at Hank.
At this boy, who'd been silent for weeks, who'd carried grief too heavy for anyone to bear, who'd finally found words at the moment they mattered most.
Pierce removed his spectacles, wiped them on his sleeve, put them back on. "I've presided over many custody hearings," he said quietly. "I've heard many arguments, many testimonies, many reasons why children should or shouldn't be placed with particular guardians. But I've never heard a child speak with more conviction than what I just witnessed." He looked at Jacob. "Mr. Mercer, your past concerns me. Your lack of experience concerns me. The unconventional nature of this arrangement concerns me." He paused. "But the welfare of these children concerns me more. And it's clear to me that their welfare is best served by remaining in your care." Jacob forgot how to breathe. "I'm granting temporary guardianship, effective immediately, to be reviewed in 6 months. Mrs. Finch, you'll continue to serve as household supervisor during this period. Sheriff Dawson, you'll conduct monthly welfare checks to ensure the children are being properly cared for." "Yes, Your Honor," Dawson said from the back of the room. "Mr. Mercer." Pierce fixed Jacob with a hard stare. "These children are now your legal responsibility. Their futures are in your hands. Do not make me regret this decision." "I won't, Your Honor." "See that you don't." Pierce gathered his papers. "This hearing is adjourned." For a moment, nobody moved. The words hung in the air, too momentous to fully absorb. Then Tommy broke the silence. "Does that mean we get to stay?" "Yes, Tommy." Carrie's voice was thick with tears. "That means we get to stay." The children erupted. Tommy whooped so loud the bailiff jumped. Sarah burst into tears, though whether from joy or relief was impossible to tell. Will's careful mask cracked, revealing the scared boy underneath, and even he couldn't hold back a smile. Carrie crossed the room and threw her arms around Jacob. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Jacob held her awkwardly, still not used to physical affection after so many years alone. But he was learning. They were all learning. Hank appeared at his side. The boy didn't speak again, but he reached out and took Jacob's hand, holding on tight. "Let's go home," Jacob said. Home. The word felt different now, fuller, more alive. They walked out of the courthouse together, all 7 of them, into the bright summer afternoon. People on the street stopped to stare. The Mercer household. That's what people were calling them now. The hermit rancher and his brood of orphans, and the fierce old widow who kept them all in line. Let them stare, Jacob thought. Let them whisper. Let them say whatever they want. These were his children now.
His family, and nothing was going to take them away. The celebration that night was modest but heartfelt. Martha had somehow procured a cake from the bakery in town, a rare luxury that made Tommy's eyes go wide. Carrie cooked the best meal she'd ever made, roast chicken with potatoes and vegetables from their garden. Even Whiskey got a special treat, a beef bone that kept him happily occupied for hours. After dinner, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one across the Montana sky. Sarah had fallen asleep in Jacob's lap, her small body warm and trusting against his chest. Tommy was teaching Will some kind of hand-clapping game that involved a lot of laughing and accidental slaps. Martha sat in the rocking chair she'd claimed as her own, her knitting needles clicking in the quiet.
Carrie settled beside Jacob on the steps. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything. Nothing." Jacob shook his head. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For someone to show up and say, 'There's been a mistake, that we have to give you back.' That's not going to happen. You don't know that. I know you." Carrie looked at him with those two old eyes. "I know you'll fight for us. I know you'll protect us. And I know that whatever comes, we'll face it together." That's a lot of faith to put in someone you've only known for a month. Faith doesn't follow a timeline. Carrie pulled her knees up to her chest. "Mama used to say that you know someone's character not by how they act when things are easy, but by how they act when things are hard. You've been hard tested, Jacob Mercer, and you passed." Jacob didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't respond at all. They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. "I need to tell you something," Carrie said finally. "What?" "I lied. That first day, when we showed up at your door, I told you we'd been walking for 6 days.
That wasn't true. It was 8 days. I didn't want you to know how desperate we really were. I thought if you knew, you'd pity us. And I didn't want pity. I wanted a chance." Jacob considered this. 8 days, with 4 younger siblings, in that heat. "There were times I didn't think we'd make it. Times I considered leaving the little ones somewhere, a church maybe, or a farm where someone might take them in. I thought they'd have a better chance without me dragging them down." "But you didn't." "No, I promised Mama, no matter what, we stay together." Carrie's voice cracked. "But I came so close, Jacob, so close to breaking that promise. And the guilt, it eats at me, even now, even knowing we made it. I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if I'd given up." Jacob shifted Sarah in his arms so he could look at Carrie directly. "Listen to me. You were 12 years old. You'd just lost your mother. You were starving, exhausted, terrified, and you still kept going. You still kept your family together. You did something most adults couldn't have done. But I thought about giving up. Thinking isn't the same as doing. Every person who's ever accomplished anything has thought about quitting. The ones who matter are the ones who keep going anyway." Jacob put his hand on her shoulder. "You kept going. You saved your siblings. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to be proud of." Carrie's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. "You sound like Mama." "Your Mama was a smart woman." "She was." Carrie wiped her face with her sleeve. "I wish she could see us now. See that we're okay. That we found someone who cares about us." "Maybe she can. I don't know much about what comes after, but I'd like to think the people we lose are still watching, still hoping for us." "Do you think your wife and daughter are watching?" The question hit Jacob in a place he usually kept locked away. He thought about Martha, about Emma, about the years he'd spent trying to forget them, and the years he'd spent trying to remember. "I hope so," he said quietly. "I hope they can see that I'm trying, that I haven't given up completely." "They'd be proud of you." "You think?" "I know." Carrie leaned against his shoulder. "You're a good man, Jacob Mercer, even if you don't believe it yet." They sat together until Sarah stirred in Jacob's arms, mumbling something about butterflies and dogs. Carrie took her sister inside to bed, and the other children followed, their voices fading into the house, leaving Jacob alone with Martha and the night. "Well," Martha said, her knitting needles finally still, "that's that." "Is it?" "For now." She stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting too long. 6 months isn't forever.
There will be more hearings, more inspections, more chances for something to go wrong. But you've got a foundation now, something to build on.
Thank you, Jacob said, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. No, you couldn't have, Martha smiled slightly. But you won't need me forever. Eventually, you'll figure out how to do this on your own. I hope you're right. I'm always right. It's exhausting, frankly. She patted his shoulder as she passed. Get some sleep, Jacob. Tomorrow's another day, and those children are going to need you rested. She went inside, leaving Jacob alone on the porch. He sat there for a long time, listening to the night sounds. Crickets chirping, Whiskey's soft snoring from inside, the distant howl of a coyote somewhere in the hills. 6 months ago, he'd been a hermit, a ghost living in a house full of memories, waiting to die without admitting he was waiting. Now he had 5 children depending on him, a household to manage, a future to plan for. It was terrifying. It was also, he was beginning to realize, exactly what he needed. Jacob stood and went inside.
Checked on the children, asleep in their beds. Checked on Whiskey, curled up at the foot of Hank's cot. Checked on Martha, already snoring softly behind her privacy screen. Then he went to his own bed, lay down, and slept without nightmares for the first time in 6 years. In the morning, Tommy woke him with questions about the chickens. Sarah demanded pancakes for breakfast. Will needed help with a fence post that had come loose. Carrie had already started the coffee, and Hank was waiting by the barn door with Whiskey at his side, ready for the day's chores. It was chaotic, messy, loud. It was home. 6 months passed faster than Jacob thought possible. Summer faded into fall. Fall surrendered to winter. And before he knew it, spring was pushing green shoots through the Montana soil again. The ranch transformed under their collective effort. Fences stood straight and strong. The garden expanded to 3 times its original size. Even the house looked different, with curtains Carrie had sewn and a fresh coat of paint Will had applied to the porch. But the biggest changes were in the children themselves. Tommy had grown 2 inches and lost the hollow look that had haunted his cheeks when he first arrived. He talked just as much as ever, but now his chatter was filled with plans for the future, with dreams of horses he'd ride and adventures he'd have. The fear that had lived behind his eyes was gone. Sarah had blossomed into a whirlwind of energy and curiosity. She followed Jacob everywhere, peppering him with questions about everything from how clouds formed to why chickens couldn't fly. She'd stopped asking about her mother, not because she'd forgotten, but because she'd finally made peace with the loss. Will had transformed from an angry, defensive boy into something approaching a young man. He worked alongside Jacob with quiet competence, anticipating needs before they were spoken, taking pride in skills he'd earned through sweat and perseverance. The hostility was long gone, replaced by a respect that went both ways. Carrie had let herself be young again. Not completely. She'd always carry the weight of responsibility that had been forced on her too soon. But there were moments now when she laughed without restraint, when she played games with her siblings instead of just supervising them, when she let Martha handle the worrying while she simply enjoyed being 12. And Hank. Hank still didn't talk much, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. He'd developed a bond with the animals that bordered on uncanny, calming spooked horses with a touch, coaxing eggs from hens that refused to lay for anyone else. Whiskey had become his constant shadow, the old dog's devotion to the boy, absolute and unwavering. The final guardianship hearing was set for the first Monday in April. Jacob woke that morning with a knot in his stomach that wouldn't untangle. He'd been through this before. The waiting, the uncertainty,
the fear that everything could be taken away in an instant. But somehow, having something to lose made it worse. "You're going to wear a hole in that floor." Martha's voice cut through his pacing. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her eternal knitting, watching him with knowing eyes. "I can't help it." "Yes, you can. Sit down. Eat breakfast. Act like a normal human being." "I don't feel like a normal human being. I feel like a man about to find out if his whole life is going to be ripped apart." Martha set down her needles. "Jacob, look at me." He stopped pacing. Looked. "Those children love you. Anyone with eyes can see it. The judge saw it 6 months ago, and he'll see it again today. You've done everything right. You followed every rule, met every requirement, passed every inspection. There's no reason for this to go badly." "There's always a reason. People like me don't get happy endings." "People like you?" Martha's voice sharpened. "You mean people who've made mistakes? People who've been broken and tried to put themselves back together? People who've lost everything and somehow found the courage to try again?" "I mean people who don't deserve—" "Stop!" Martha stood up, crossing the room to stand directly in front of him. "Stop telling yourself you don't deserve this. Stop waiting for the universe to punish you for sins you've already paid for 10 times over. Those children chose you. I chose you. At some point, you need to start believing that we made the right choice." Jacob stared at her, at this fierce old woman who'd upended her entire life to help a stranger and his orphans. "What if I fail them?" "Then you'll fail trying, which is more than most people do." Martha put her hand on his arm. "But you won't fail. I've been watching you for 6 months, Jacob Mercer. I've seen how you are with those children. You're not the man you used to be. You're not even the man you were when they first showed up at your door. You've changed. You've grown. And that's exactly what a father is supposed to do." Father. The word hit him like it always did, a punch to the chest that left him breathless. "I'm not their father. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does. Sacrifice does. Showing up every single day even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you want to give up. That's what makes a father." Martha squeezed his arm. "And that's what you've been doing, every single day for 6 months." The children appeared in the doorway, dressed in their best clothes, faces scrubbed clean. Carrie had braided Sarah's hair. Will had actually combed his. Tommy was bouncing on his heels, unable to contain his energy, and Hank stood quietly at the back, whiskey pressed against his leg. "We're ready," Carrie said. Jacob looked at them, at his family, at the 5 souls who'd wandered into his life and refused to leave. "Then let's go." The courtroom was just as small as Jacob remembered, just as cramped and improvised, and nothing like what a place of such importance should look like. But the people inside were different. The chairs that had been mostly empty 6 months ago were now filled. Reverend Thomas was there, and Doc Williams, and Sheriff Dawson with his wife. The Petersons from the neighboring ranch had come, and the Mitchells from town, and a dozen other faces Jacob recognized from his cautious re-entry into community life. They'd all come to support him, to stand as witnesses to the family he'd built. Judge Pierce took his seat at the bench, the same spectacles perched on his nose, the same measuring look in his eyes. "This court is now in session for the final guardianship review of Clara, William, Thomas, Henry, and Sarah Holloway." He shuffled papers. "I've reviewed the inspection reports, the welfare checks, the testimony from various community members. The record appears exemplary." "Thank you, Your Honor," Martha said. "However—" Pierce looked up. "Before I make my final ruling, I'd like to hear from the children again. 6 months is a long time. People change. Circumstances change. I want to ensure that the arrangement that seemed right then still seems right now." He looked at Carrie first. Miss Holloway, you're 13 now, correct?
Yes, sir. Turned 13 in February.
And how would you describe your life over the past 6 months? Carrie stood a little straighter.
Honestly, Your Honor, it's been the best 6 months of my life. Better than anything I ever imagined when Mama died. Mr. Mercer, Jacob, he's given us everything. A home, a family, a future.
I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Before him, I couldn't see past the next day. Now I can see years ahead, decades, a whole life. And you want that life to include Mr. Mercer? I can't imagine it without him. Pierce nodded. William? Will stepped forward. 6 months ago, I told you Jacob wasn't perfect, that he'd done things he wasn't proud of. That's still true. But here's what I've learned since then. Perfect doesn't exist. Every person has things in their past they'd rather forget. What matters is what you do next. And Jacob, he's spent 6 months showing us what he does next. He works harder than anyone I've ever known. He's patient, even when we make him crazy. He's fair, even when we don't deserve it. Will's voice cracked slightly. He's the father I always wished I had. The courtroom went quiet. Thomas, Pierce said gently. Tommy bounded forward with barely contained energy.
I love it here. I love the chickens and whiskey and the horses and the creek where we fish on Sundays. I love that Jacob teaches me stuff, like how to fix fences and how to read horse tracks and how to whistle really loud. I love that we have family dinners every night, all of us together, talking about our days. I love... He paused, suddenly serious. I love that I'm not scared anymore. When Mama was sick, I was scared all the time. After she died, I was even more scared. But I'm not scared now, because I know Jacob will protect us. I know nothing bad can happen as long as he's here. Pierce's expression softened. Sarah? Sarah stepped forward shyly, clutching a small cloth doll Carrie had made her. I like Jacob, she said in her small voice. He gives good hugs, and he lets me help feed the chickens, and he never yells, even when I spill things. She paused, thinking. Mama's in heaven now, I know that. But Jacob's here, and I think Mama would like him. I think she'd be happy we found him. Pierce removed his spectacles, cleaned them, replaced them. His eyes were suspiciously bright. Henry? Hank didn't move at first. He stood at the back of the group, his hand resting on Whiskey's head, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he walked to the front of the room. He didn't speak immediately. The silence stretched, and Jacob felt his heart pounding, afraid that the boy might have retreated back into that terrible quiet, afraid that all the progress might have been an illusion. But then Hank looked up, met the judge's eyes directly. When Mama died, he said slowly, each word deliberate and clear, I stopped talking. The words wouldn't come out. It was like they were trapped inside me, and the door was locked. The courtroom was absolutely still. Jacob didn't try to force the door open. He didn't make me feel bad for being quiet. He just waited. He let me know he was there. He let me know I was safe. And when I was ready, when the words finally came back, he was the first person I wanted to talk to. Hank's voice grew stronger. I was broken when we came here. We all were. But Jacob didn't see broken children. He saw a family. He saw us. And he chose us anyway. The boy's eyes glistened. Nobody ever chose us before. Nobody ever wanted us. But he did. And that's why I want to stay with him forever. Jacob couldn't breathe.
couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there and feel the weight of this boy's words, the trust they contained, the love they represented. Pierce cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer, is there anything you'd like to say before I make my ruling?" Jacob stepped forward, on legs that felt unsteady. "Your Honor, 6 months ago you asked me why I wanted these children. I told you I didn't want them, that they'd shown up at my door and I'd just reacted, just did what seemed necessary in the moment." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "That was true then. It's not true anymore. Now I want them, more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. They're not just children I'm taking care of. They're my children, my family. The reason I wake up in the morning, and the reason I try to be better than I was the day before." His voice cracked. "I was dead before they came. Walking around, breathing, going through the motions, but dead inside. They brought me back to life. They gave me a reason to exist. And I know I can never repay that debt. I know I'll never be good enough to deserve what they've given me. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying." He looked at the children, at Carrie's tear-streaked face, at Will's proud expression, at Tommy's barely contained joy, at Sarah's innocent smile, at Hank's quiet nod. "Please, Your Honor, let me keep my family. Let me spend the rest of my days being the father they deserve. It's all I want. It's all I'll ever want." Silence filled the courtroom. Judge Pierce studied the papers in front of him for what felt like an eternity. Then he set them aside and looked directly at Jacob. "Mr. Mercer, in all my years on the bench, I've rarely seen a transformation as complete as the one I've witnessed in this case. 6 months ago, you were a broken man, isolated and grieving, barely surviving. Today, you stand before me as a father, surrounded by children who clearly love you, and whom you clearly love in return." He picked up his gavel. "It is the ruling of this court that Jacob Mercer be granted full and permanent guardianship of Clara, William, Thomas, Henry, and Sarah Holloway, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. This guardianship shall be legally equivalent to adoption, making Mr. Mercer their father in the eyes of the law." The gavel came down. "This case is closed." For a moment, nothing happened. The words hung in the air, too momentous to absorb. Then Tommy screamed. Not a scream of fear, but of pure, uncontainable joy. He launched himself at Jacob, nearly knocking him over. Sarah followed, grabbing Jacob's leg and holding on for dear life. Will crossed the room in 3 long strides and threw his arms around them all. Carrie was crying openly now, laughing and crying at the same time. And Hank, quiet, reserved Hank, pushed through the tangle of bodies and pressed his face against Jacob's chest, his small shoulders shaking with sobs. Jacob held them all, his children, his family, his reason for being. Martha was crying too, though she'd deny it later. Even Sheriff Dawson looked suspiciously emotional. The townspeople who'd come to support them broke into applause, the sound filling the small courtroom and spilling out into the street. "We did it," Carrie whispered. "We're really a family now." "We were always a family," Jacob said, his voice rough with emotion. "Now it's just official." They walked out of the courthouse together, into a spring afternoon that felt like the first day of a new life. Because it was. That evening, they gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Martha had declared a celebration, which meant a special dinner and cake from the bakery and absolutely no chores. The children had run wild all afternoon, playing and laughing with an abandon that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Now, as the sky turned orange and pink and purple, they sat together in contented exhaustion. "I've been thinking," Martha said, breaking the comfortable silence, This house is getting crowded. If I'm going to stay permanently, we might need to add a room or two." "Permanently?" Jacob looked at her. "Someone has to keep you from making a mess of things." Martha smiled slightly. "Besides, where else would I go? These children are as much mine now as they are yours. I'm not leaving them." "We don't want you to leave," Tommy said quickly.
"You make the best biscuits." "Is that all I'm good for? Biscuits?" "And yelling at us when we track mud in the house. And teaching Carrie how to sew. And telling stories at bedtime." Tommy grinned. "But mostly biscuits." Martha laughed, a rare and precious sound. "I'll take it." Sarah had fallen asleep in Jacob's lap, her breathing slow and even. He shifted her gently, marveling at the trust she placed in him, the complete security she felt in his arms. A year ago, he'd been a ghost, a shell of a man haunting an empty house, waiting for death without having the courage to seek it out. Now he had 5 children, a fierce old woman who'd become his partner in this unlikely venture, and a dog who'd transferred his loyalty to a silent boy who needed it more than Jacob ever had. "Jacob?" Carrie's voice was soft. "Hmm? Do you think Mama knows that we're okay? That we found you?" Jacob thought about Ruth Holloway, a woman he'd never met but felt he knew through her children. A woman who'd worked herself to death trying to keep her family together. A woman whose last words had been a plea for her children to stay united. "I think she knows," he said. "I think she's been watching over you this whole time. And I think she's proud of you. All of you." "Do you think your wife and daughter are watching too?" The question didn't hurt the way it once would have. The wound was still there, would always be there, but it had scarred over, become part of him rather than something that defined him. "I hope so. I hope they can see that I didn't give up, that I found a reason to keep going." He paused. "I hope they understand that loving you doesn't mean I stopped loving them. There's room in a heart for more than one family." "That's a good way to think about it," Carrie said. Will appeared in the doorway, Hank at his side. "Martha says it's time for cake." "Then we better not keep her waiting." Jacob stood carefully, still holding Sarah. "Wake Tommy." "He'll never forgive us if he misses dessert."
They went inside together, leaving the sunset behind, entering a home that was full of light and warmth and noise and love. Later that night, after the cake was eaten and the children were in bed, and Martha had retired to her corner with her knitting, Jacob stepped outside alone. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars he'd watched on 1,000 lonely nights. But they looked different now, brighter somehow, more alive. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the years of grief and isolation. The night 5 children had stumbled into his barn, half dead and desperate. The choice he'd made to let them stay, a choice that had seemed so small at the time and had changed everything. He thought about Martha and Emma, about the family he'd lost and the family he'd found, about the strange mathematics of love, how it didn't divide when you shared it, but multiplied. He thought about second chances, about whether people deserved them, about whether that even mattered, or whether the only thing that mattered was what you did when you got one. The door opened behind him. Hank stepped onto the porch, whiskey at his heels. "Couldn't sleep?" Jacob asked. Hank shook his head. He came to stand beside Jacob, looking up at the stars. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. When I stopped talking, most people would have thought I was broken forever. But you didn't. You waited. You believed I'd come back." Jacob put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "You were never broken, Hank. Just healing. There's a difference." "Is that what you were doing? Before we came? Healing?" "I thought I was. Turns out I was just hiding. Jacob looked down at him. You five didn't heal me. You woke me up. Made me realize that hiding isn't the same as healing. That the only way to get better is to let people in, even when it's terrifying. Hank nodded slowly.
I'm glad we found you. I'm glad you found me too. They stood together in the darkness, man and boy, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside the house, the rest of their family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were wanted, they were loved, they were home. Jacob thought about all the ways this story could have ended. The children dead in the wilderness, the orphanage in Helena, separate families, separate lives, the promise to their mother broken and scattered to the winds. Instead, they were here, together. A family forged not from blood, but from choice, from desperation, from the simple human need to belong somewhere. We should get some sleep, Jacob said finally. Tomorrow's a big day. Why? What's tomorrow? Nothing special, just another day. Chores to do, lessons to learn, meals to eat. The ordinary stuff that makes up a life. Hank smiled, a rare and beautiful thing. I like ordinary. So do I. Jacob ruffled the boy's hair. So do I. They went inside together, leaving the stars to their ancient paths. The door closed behind them with a soft click, sealing out the night, sealing in the warmth. And in that house on the Montana plains, a family slept. Not perfect, but whole. Not traditional, but real. Not bound by blood, but by something stronger. By choice. By love. By the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Jacob Mercer had spent 6 years waiting to die. Now, finally, he was ready to live.